Help me find a name and a logo. Code Quack? No. What's up guys, I hope you guys enjoyed that intro. I'm gonna get straight into the video because I've been doing very long intros and I think that's actually killing my retention rate. A couple things for you to do: if you like the video, If you're new here, you can subscribe and maybe check out some other videos. This is not a programming video, this is a cinematography video. So I'm gonna try and explain first Aperture in some analogies, real world examples, and if they're confusing, don't worry, because we're going to be going through a lot of examples that I spent a lot of time getting. Think about your eye. When you were a kid, you would put like a light in your friend's eye and you would actually see the pupil get much smaller. That's like aperture. Aperture is an iris inside of the lens. You have like these fins, and these fins make a circle, and depending on the setting they go bigger or smaller. So the lower your aperture goes, the larger the circle becomes. Let's pretend that this is my video. The camera is shooting from here and this would be the end of the frame, so maybe like the wall behind me here. So this is the camera where my fingers are, and all the way back there is the wall. I am this black text here that says Rock Band, and my fingers here are going to be our focus range. And as our aperture gets lower, our focus range gets much smaller. As our aperture gets larger, our focus range gets larger. And our goal is to have the the focus range perfectly on the edges of our subject. So in this case, something like that would look perfect. This would be bad if we were to have these two fingers, and our goal is to have our focus range, would be the ends of my two fingers, perfectly on the edges of our subject. Now this would be the ideal. This would be bad because too much would be in focus, and this would be bad because too little would be in focus. Problem is, it's not just as simple as changing a setting, because when you change your aperture, you mess with a bunch of other things, like the fact that when your iris gets smaller, your image gets a lot darker due to the fact that not as much light is going in, versus you open your aperture and a lot more light is going in. So one issue I've ran into is when I have my aperture all the way down and it's very bright outside, too much light's coming in, my image pretty much becomes a white screen, and without an ND filter, I'm screwed. If that didn't make sense, let's jump into the examples and I'm going to explain everything to you with visual examples. So here is clip number 1. This is at f1.2. This is the lowest setting, lowest aperture I can go to with this lens. As you can see, I'm perfectly exposed. I actually wanted to expose myself perfectly in the first shot and then show you guys what happens over time as you change the setting. If you look in the background, we can see that there's a plant here, there's some couch pillows, there's a couch, but I doubt any of you can tell what's on the shelves here and what that yellow thing. Now let's move on to the next one and keep an eye on all those things I just pointed out. Here is the next clip. I'm doing some nice pose, and notice how the screen itself is not in focus, but my face is. If you look towards the back of my head, my hairs and my hat are actually pretty much in focus, but if we go back to that first shot, you can see my hat is pretty much blurred out. So what happened here is the focus range is so short that while my nose, my mouth, and my eyes are in focus, as you go toward the back of my head, so if you guys actually look at my little cam here in the bottom corner, this might be my focus range, right? And everything behind it is it's starting to fade out to blur like the background. And if you go here and let's say look at my shoulders, you can see that as my shoulder curves, it actually goes into the more blurry section, and the chair here, the corner of it is pretty blurry. But if we go back to here, it's blurry, but it's a lot less, and it's gonna keep changing. But also pay attention to how the lighting changes. So I would look at my face, maybe like my nose or something, and then boom. I don't know if you realize, but the image definitely got darker. Let's move one more step into the higher aperture range. So you can notice that the picture did get darker. We're at f5 now, which would be typically what you would use with a subject, at least in my opinion, that takes up to like 40% of the screen. I'm using a lot of the screen, so this is a really good aperture. As you can see, my shoulders and the chair itself are pretty crispy. The edges are pretty crispy and they're pretty much in focus. You look at my face, you've got the baby hairs here, you can see them. You've got my chin, my back, everything's looking nice and crispy. Now it'd be a lot crispier with a different type of camera, but sadly the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera is like 10 megapixels or something like that, so it's not very high. But this is usually your ideal look. The shoulder here, you can see the edges, they're very crispy, but right behind it, everything is super blurry and creamy. That's the look you want to go for. If you look at this drumstick I'm holding, it's in the foreground, which pretty much is like about 2 feet from me, and it is not in focus, as well as the monitor, which is not in focus. So again, if you guys look at the bottom corner, maybe with my aperture at f5, you know, I have like a foot of focus range, and the monitor and the drumstick are out of that foot, so they're blurry, but they're not as blurry as the background. Let's push it up even more and let's see what happens. So now the image got even darker. If you didn't see that, let me do a couple of those. You can noticeably see that the reflection on glass and the outside actually gets darker from there to there. Now if we zoom into the shelf in the back, we could start to see the items in the back. We could see this bowl here, we could see another bowl here, and we can see that these are actually flowers. But if we go into the first one, it is so creamy and hard to see that you wouldn't have realized. Now that you know what it is, it's a lot more obvious. If you look at me, again, I'm perfectly crispy, my edges are nice, but the background is starting to come into focus at a level that I really don't want and I'm not comfortable with. I much rather this, not a lot of detail and you're focused to look at me, but my edges aren't crispy, they're fading out to the blur. So we do want to choose one that makes more sense, and usually that ends up being f.4 to 5. Always depending on how much of the shot you're taking and how wide you are and how many subjects and targets you got in your shot. That's why you always got to play with it. And when you push up your aperture, you want to compensate for the light decrease, either adding ISO to your shot, which will add noise, or the ideal version to add more lighting in your scene. But that gets a bit tricky because you do have harsh light that reflects off of things and can totally destroy your image in the terms of looking cinematic. Here's f11. This is the darkest I would ever go with my camera, as long as I have the lights that I have now. They're not powerful enough and I don't have enough to brighten my scene up to the point where I can use an aperture like this. This is what I would use if I had to record like 25 kids in a classroom and make them all in focus. This is what I would use. But usually what you do is you use like f5 to 8, have your person, your main target who's speaking in focus, and then the other person slightly out of focus to direct the viewer's vision towards that focused object. And that's what you use aperture for. Otherwise we'd have everything in focus. But aperture is nice because you can focus your subjects or your viewers, whatever you want to call them, to look at something specific. So right here, you're not going to look at anything but me, maybe just because I'm talking about it, but I'm the only thing in focus. It's the only thing that's interesting. It's nice, it's clear, it's sharp. Here, you know, you've got the dog, you've got the plants, you've got the stuff in the background, you've got so many things to look at. It's a lot more distracting. Here I used the macro lens that I have. It's a 100mm Canon macro lens. For those who don't know what macro lenses are, they're very sharp cameras that you use for very small things. Like, you ever see the shots of like someone's eye? So something like on the intro clip where I shot this was shot on the macro lens. It actually looks pretty funky. I have it next to me right here, but that could be another video if any of you are interested on what a macro lens is and why I think it's one of the best lenses to have in my kit. Here I recorded some stationary grapes, so something that's not moving, so it's very easy to keep in focus. And I was changing the aperture, and I was doing something that I invented, I guess, I'm gonna call it the car key test. So I had a car key and I was moving it along the desk, and as I was moving it along the desk, you could see the fade from blur. You can see it fade from blur to focus over time. So it's never a hard cut, it's over time. And you can see after those two clips that one time that it took a while to get into the focus, where the other time it got into focus pretty quickly because of the difference in aperture. In this clip, I was having a really hard time, and I actually kind of wanted to have a hard time with this one thing. I had my lowest aperture on my macro lens, which was 2, so it was f2. And with f2, your focus distance, that example I gave you with the Rock Band stick and me trying to keep the Rock Band letters in focus, it's so small, so something like that, let me bring this up to the camera, that you can't actually keep your whole item in focus. And this is a very tiny item. This is not even an inch in width. It's a car key and it's on a slight angle, so it's not even an inch, but it's such a small window of focus that you can see me going between forward focus and backward focus, just trying to get the whole thing into focus. And it wasn't happening. So in this case, I would up my aperture, extend my focus distance, my focus range, whatever, and then the whole key would be in focus. Hopefully this isn't too complicated for you guys. I really want this to be a valuable video, but short. If you guys enjoyed it, you can like it, you can subscribe to my channel. It helps me all the way. I'm actually about to leave to go to shoot a skit with a couple actors, so I gotta pack up all this stuff, throw it in a bag, get in the car, and drive there. I really hope you guys are going to enjoy this skit. I think it's going to drop tonight or tomorrow morning, so I might be dropping 2 vids today. If you want to ask questions, I love talking about this stuff, so just hop into a stream. I stream on Twitch and on YouTube. Twitch I do every day, YouTube I do whenever I post a video. Code Duck, Duck Code, Code Quack, I don't know. Help me find a name and a logo. Code Quack? No.